Hello, and thank you for joining us for the first Designer Studios, a new series in which we find out a little bit more about some of the spaces and places where creatives do their very best work. Now, I'm delighted to be joined by the fantastic Miles Hartwell, who, along with Matt Withington, co-founded the design studio Splinterworks, and who in fact we featured quite a few times in Designer magazine over the years. So a very warm welcome to you, Miles.
Okay. Hi, Martin. Well, yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for all those features you mentioned.
Yeah. Well, there's some great projects we featured, so I'm sure we'll be able to show one or two of those as well over the course of the next few minutes. But I wanted to start today, for those who perhaps aren't so familiar with Splinterworks and what you guys do, if you could start by telling us a little bit about the company, when you started and where you're based.
So we started in 2009, just as the world was turning into a different kind of turmoil than we're in now, and Lehman Brothers had just gone to the wall, and everything was a bit up in the air. And of course, we felt the perfect time to launch a luxury kind of high-end sculptural furniture business. Of course, why not? But all those times were tricky. I mean, I think if there's any lesson to be learned from the situation we all face ourselves in now, I mean, there's no perfect time, is there? And I think if you waited for a perfect time, we'd never do anything. So I don't know. There are silver linings and unintended consequences, and I think one of those is that at times it was difficult when we first started, but ultimately that's led into a kind of company culture that is very much, where we very much cherish our clients and do our best for them, because they were all very hard fought in the beginning. So that's kind of, how and when we started. We are a company that, well, essentially, when we started out, so I should say, to be a sculptural kitchen company was the intention. That's the very first intention. But because things were a little tricky, we had to diversify, and we started doing bits of furniture as well. And then we ended up doing bathtubs and swimming pool slides and all sorts of other things as well. I mean, essentially, we're a design company that specializes in reimagining design objects as pieces of usable sculpture.
Sure. That sort of transition from the kitchen idea to a real diversification, if you like, into other areas, was that quite an organic process? Was that based on clients that you were talking to and different opportunities that came along?
We had some very grand ideas when we first started about these. We were very inspired back in sort of mid noughties about this movement called design art at the time, with people like Wendell Castle, Ron Arad, doing incredible works that were very sculptural pieces of furniture. And we thought we could translate some of these ideas into kitchens. And of course, what happened is that we set up on our own. The world economy went like this, and it was very difficult to persuade anyone to kind of commit, not just in terms of finances, but their time as well, to two guys who essentially had no portfolio, no existing clients, to kind of really go for it and let them do the kind of work we wanted to do. Anyway, so in order for us to actually show something, we sort of scrimped and saved from the project we were working on, and put aside enough money to make a piece of furniture which we showed at Decorex in 2011, and that was actually kind of a real sort of pivot point for us, where we actually showed a piece of freestanding furniture, and it was the first time we moved away from just purely focusing on kitchens. Right. And that opened up all sorts of doors.
Okay, because we've seen, as I said, we featured a lot of the work that you've done, and the scale can be quite significant in terms of the scope and size of things that you're working on. So perhaps you can tell us a little bit about the space that you have, how it's set up, and how many people you typically have working on some of your projects.
Okay, so we would typically at the the heart of Splinterworks. There's kind of half a dozen of us that work together, but we don't necessarily all work in the same space at the same time, because we all have quite different roles in that business, and we run. I mean, for those of you who are familiar with our work, you'll realise we do quite a broad spectrum of work that goes to everything from kind of carbon fibre bathtubs that are made in by companies that are sort of more used to making parts for Formula One cars, right through to kind of traditional woodwork that is, and everything in between. They're very, very different skills, very different workshops. And so, I mean, well, before COVID, we were all in an office in Bath that we shared a space with a creative digital agency in Bath, and that was a very buzzy place that was kind of full of life and ping pong tables and stuff like that, which was all very cool. Now we're all like little satellites orbiting each other, all working from home. But yeah, I do look forward to the days to come back when we have a bit more of a hub to focus around.
Sure, but so even in non-COVID times, the work would take place in various locations then. So we're not talking about one big workshop that you guys would work in.
No, it's impossible. And actually, that's quite a key feature of our companies. But I think if you were to have a workshop, I think you would always end up designing things that can be made in that workshop.
Right.
If you don't have your own workshop, you then kind of free yourself mentally to say, yeah, well, why couldn't we work in carbon fiber? Why shouldn't we work in glass or leather or kind of sheet form steel or even like, I don't know, it could be fiberglass, anything. But if you are limited to your own workshops, then I think you do find that does perhaps narrow you down a bit. We do have a workshop just north of Bristol where we do lots of prototyping and some woodworking on some freestanding pieces. But generally speaking, it's a big spread.
So you'd be, if you were focused on one location, you're constrained by that space. You think, it sort of, you start thinking in those terms.
I could see very easily how that could happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
If you had a workshop with sort of 10 guys in it that were expert wood and furniture makers, then you'd have to be out of your mind, then start designing furniture in glass, wouldn't you?
Sure, absolutely, yeah. So, in terms of the creative process, though, for you, I mean, what about the sources of inspiration? What do you kind of rely on for some of those ideas? I mean, typically, where you're working, would you use, mood boards, magazines, books? I mean, obviously, it's a given that Designer magazine would be a key reference point.
Of course,
that's understood. But beyond that, what else would there be?
Well, besides the obvious, firstly, I'll say, of course, you can't help but be inspired by things that are on the internet these days that you would just come across. And there's so much incredible work, and so many people have the ability to share things so easily now that I think we have access to insights into people's creative work that you would never have had 15, 20 years ago. So there's inspiration all across the internet. But I don't think we necessarily as a company go looking for inspiration. In fact, we are quite conscious to try and avoid trends and things like that. I wouldn't say we regularly kind of go looking for inspiration in some of the places perhaps you've suggested. What I think instead is that we often find that there's an inspiration to be had when we're with our clients. So often, I mean, sadly that hasn't happened much recently, but when you are meeting clients for the first time, you're going to their homes and learning about their lifestyles or seeing around their home or understanding what it is they want to try and achieve, their ambitions for the space. That's where our creative minds start kind of latching onto various aspects of that conversation. I think we find that that's quite an inspiring process in itself. And then, of course, there's between Matt and I, there is, that's the reason we work together. The reason we set up business together is because we have a creative spark. And so, when we're together and the mood hits, then we have there's a sort of big opportunity for sort of creative inspiration with each other, just bouncing ideas around. So
and within the space that you work with, that you work within, how do you bring some of those ideas to reality? I mean, what kind of technology or tools do you typically use? And I suppose the big one is there one thing that you just couldn't operate without?
I mean, I think we'd be hard pushed to get by without a sketchbook and pen. I mean, that is the absolute genesis of everything that we do creatively. Maybe not sketchbook, even just bits of old paper out the printer. That's really is key to a lot of stuff we do. I mean, and there are, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands and thousands of kind of discarded sketches by harebrained ideas and things that we've sort of come up with over the last 10 years or so. But when between us we feel an idea really has some mileage to it, I think as that develops, you'll find that we use, depending on what it is. I mean, if it's something very sculptural, we'll often use things like just basic modeling clay or plasticine, just to kind of, so it's like a three-dimensional sketch, to sit there and very quick and easy, just kind of push things into shape and kind of go, how about that? And beyond that, in terms of technology, we use 3D modeling software called Rhino that I'm sure lots of people watching this are familiar with. That's our weapon of choice. And we find it's really good for everything we need it for. I mean, one quite exciting thing is that in our workshop in Bristol, I mentioned earlier, we've actually just taken delivery of a 5-axis CNC machine. So this year, we're quite looking forward to working on some prototypes with that. I mean, there's a big learning curve ahead of us, but I really look forward to seeing how that kind of changes how we develop ideas, because I think we can go from sketch through plasticine into Rhino and then onto actually something kind of life size or even just like proper scale models quite quickly.
And with a real mix of, I suppose, quite old school. If you're talking about just a sketchbook and pen, pencil, and then you talk about some of that technology, you've got just the whole process goes through the real mix of old school and real cutting edge stuff, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think particularly when you're dealing with very three-dimensional forms. So if you've seen some of the swimming pool slides we do, some of the furniture we make, it's quite often, it's very hard to draw with a pen, and it's very hard to model on a computer unless you've really got a sense of where you're going with it first. And so those old school methods, where they're very forgiving, aren't they? Pens and paper, bits of plasticine, you can just change it so fast, and there's no don't get bogged down in accuracy in the same way you do when you're on the computer.
Yeah. Well, I was also thinking that in terms of the space where you work, whether it be the workshops that you use or your sort of office, as it were, if there's one thing that you could change about your space, say logistically or money wise, with no objects in my way, what would you most want to do with a workspace to change it for the better?
Wow. I mean, obviously, besides, we're talking kind of not in COVID lockdown home working.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, because of course the answer really would be, I look forward to kind of being back and working as a team. But I don't know. I think one of the most exciting things that would be a great change for us, if ever the opportunity arose, would be to actually merge our prototyping workshop and our design studios together, so that you can really have a sense that it's a place of a multi-purpose. I think you can often get, if you're working in an office, it's very easy to have that office mindset. But if there's kind of machines whirring away and people making things around you, it definitely lends something to the whole process, I think, and to the business, not just in terms of logistics and moving through some of those stages a bit faster, possibly, but I don't think faster would be the end goal. I think it would just be a more cohesive business if we could kind of have everyone in one space. That would be good. Yeah.
Seamless hub of activity, perhaps.
Yeah,
How it would be. But
yeah, and I think there'd be a cross-pollination of ideas, wouldn't you? Because you could quite easily be sitting at your desk, just trying to figure something out or having a conversation with someone, and then go, and by the afternoon, by tea time, you could have banged something together, and that was, I think back to, kind of almost like being a child when I was younger, and start having access to my father's workshop. And I know these things weren't exactly works of incredible importance, but it was the ability just to kind of bang things together, just have that immediacy to it that was it's very creative. And that could
sure. Well, and my final question for you is really about. I know this is a really personal insight. This one, on a scale of 1 to 10, how tidy is your desk? You don't have to show us, by the way. Oh,
I would say that my desk is like 10 is the tidiest, is it? Yeah, I'd say my desk normally hovers around a 5. I don't know. What would you say that is?
I'd say it's pretty good. I'd say it's a bit more than a 5. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah. It's you know what it is? It's normally the floor around the desk that suffers the most.
Well, I appreciate you. I'll tell you one thing that gives you probably a bit more about where that question's coming from. I am not going to be turning the camera around to show you mine.
Come on.
So you can draw your own conclusions from that.
I showed you mine, you just show me yours.
Not going to happen because it's all going to fall apart here anyway. But no, that's fantastic, Miles. Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate you giving some insight into your designer studio. Let's hope that normality is back soon enough so that synergy element comes back for us all. So fingers crossed on that. And thanks for all of you for watching. I hope you'll join us again soon for the next Designer Studios at designerati.co.uk. And in the meantime, bye for now.